Theme song for the Gear Podcast. Welcome to the Gear Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Troy Napperbarn.
Now, I'm Leon Todd, and I have to say that that's my first time, like everybody else, hearing that theme song. And Troy, I got to say, I really love the way you captured the live vibe of that one on the recording. How many takes did you have to do for that?
Oh, mate, they call me the one-hit wonder for a reason.
You gone
done. Not because I'm good at baseball.
Not because you're good at baseball, because you're an absolute gun at centre half forward.
Yeah, well, I just remembered as I was about to start that I said there'd be a theme song, but I forgot all about it. So during the week, so I figured I have to improvise.
That wasn't the theme song.
Not pre-recorded, just off the cuff. I think we all get the picture. But better than nothing.
I love it, mate. How was your week?
My week was all right. I had a little visit from an old friend on Wednesday. He came by, got a coffee, and then just walked around my studio with a video camera for a little while. That was pretty cool.
I saw the video online. That was a pretty good one.
I've read through the comments, so that was nice.
Yeah, were there any comments we wanted to highlight or anything on Instagram? Any shout outs we want to give people?
I don't think we got anything on Insta this week, to be honest with you. I was about to say I'm going to find the video and see if there's any more comments, but I don't think that. I think it was just people loving it, just frothing it, mate. Just can't get enough of the Gear Pod.
Yeah, exactly. And if you cannot get enough of the Gear Pod, be sure to check out some of the numerous recordings that myself and Troy have made under various titles. The best way, of course, is to go and buy some Ragdoll merchandise or CDs from our Bandcamp, because, it's product straight up. But otherwise, you can go to one of Troy's gigs.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you say our Bandcamp,
buy him a lemonade.
That doesn't include, that's not my Bandcamp, that's Leon's Bandcamp. You can just give me cash. That's fine. Just come to Perth, Western Australia, put a couple of buckaroos in my guitar case.
Put a pineapple in the guitar case and you're sweet.
Yep.
You'll play Sweet Home Alabama for $50, won't you?
Then Sweet Child of Mine, and then Sweet Dreams Are Made of These, and just all the sweets, the candy box.
I feel like the people of the Gear Podcast should be let into this little story. I'll let them wet their whistle with this one. We used to play in Kalgoorlie fairly regularly, which, for anyone unfamiliar with Western Australia, if you imagine what, like 80s movies about Australia and what they thought the outback looked like, and there's always this town, that's basically what Kalgoorlie actually is. It's in the middle of nowhere. There's a lot of red dirt. There's a few pubs. And there was a guy who used to come to our gigs there called Cole. And Cole was a pretty sweet guy, but when he got on it, he got on it. And this one gig we're playing, Cole's standing right at the front of the stage, and in between every song, he's just screaming, "Sweets, play sweets, play sweets." And we're like, "Sweet Home Alabama, here you go, Cole." He's like, "No, mate, sweets. Sweet Child of Mine, here you go, Cole." No, sweets. Finally, in the set break, we're going, "Cole, what is sweets?" He goes, "That's just what I call Here I Go Again."
How could you not know that?
That was our reaction. Like, why would you call Here I Go Again sweets? He thought, I just thought that sounded like a good name for it. So
David Coverdale, it's not too late.
David Coverdale, it's not too late, mate. You can still change the name. So shout out to Cole if he's listening. I was thinking about that guy the other day and I kind of miss him. He was a lovely man, and his great-grandfather, the Carnaby's cockatoo, is named after him. So,
well, there you go.
There you go. Carnaby's cockatoo is named after his great-granddad, and Whitesnake Sweets is named after him.
He wasn't Cambong, was he?
Nah, no, that was a different guy. We'll leave that one for next week's podcast so I can fully recount the saga of madness that went along with that. So anyway, there's my new segment, which is called Things People Say at Gigs.
Stories from the past. Can we just quickly address a couple of things, actually? The comments on that YouTube video.
Those comments. So
there's not too much there.
That's why there's the other sweets. Yeah. I'm an idiot.
I think it was people loving it. I'd love to see the podcast in video format on YouTube. We might get to that at some point. We are looking at each other right now, so if we can be bothered to screen cap it, then bing, bang, boom.
I think what I will do is I will take the audio podcast we have done and I'll just put in really flattering photos of us and upload them to my YouTube, because there's actually a podcast upload subsection on YouTube now. So anyone who wants to hear it on YouTube, I will put them up and you can listen to it there. I'll try and get that done this week.
That's a bloody ripping idea, mate. Ripper-dipper. That was from Saran Ooh, I can't. I'm gonna butcher this name. Saranganarayan. That's like when someone reads my surname Nababan and
Yeah,
butchers it. So
exactly.
sorry about that. A couple of comments about the stiletto. So Paul Lembo says the stiletto was designed to complement the recto in a two guitar mix. Unsurprisingly, it does this really well. That's why why it's neither a recto nor a Marshall clone. Which I believe we've tried that before, haven't we? Trying to get
I can believe that. Yeah.
It's funny because like even I watched the video back and the end section where you sort of play through those amps for a little bit, like sometimes when I hear that stiletto, it doesn't sound that Marshall-y to me. In that video, it kind of did sound Marshall-y. It's just weird. Like I don't get the same sensation as I'm recording it sometimes, but maybe with the video on there and stuff, it was a bit more deceiving or something. I don't know. Weird. So that was cool. But yeah, I think I reckon we tried that on Rust, didn't we? Wasn't that stiletto and recto?
Mate, I actually cannot remember. I know there's definitely recto on there. I can't remember what the other thing was. If it was,
it might have been.
Surprised if it was stiletto.
Do you know what the other song that can I say any of the working titles for those songs?
Oh, of course, mate.
When
all the working titles are pretty funny, so no one's going to know.
Yeah, what's the song? The World You Gave Us from the album, the Back to Zero album. The working title of that was Nut Meat.
Yep, because I believe we played a gig for New Year's up in Shark Bay, and we were perusing the selection they had at IGA, and there was just a thing in there labeled Nut Meat, and we thought, how fun is this? That's a perfect name for a song.
Well, the second after we did Rust, because we did 2 songs at a time. This is about 5 years ago, Uncle Leon.
This is 500,000 years ago.
Yeah, so we did
before humans.
We did Rust.
Fully human.
Yeah, well, Rust ended up being the working title and stayed with the name of the song. But the second song we did in that same group of songs was Meet the Meat, I believe.
Yes.
So MEET, the MEAT. And I think maybe it was on that song that there was a stiletto recto combo. I think we used recto for both of those 2 songs. One had Splawn and one had stiletto, but I don't remember which one's which. So anyway, it's a good combo. I like it. It doesn't work for everything. I'm actually not doing a quad track thing anymore or on many projects. I'm getting a bit over it. I'm sort of liking 2 different amps pan left and right personally. So maybe I should just do that with recto and stiletto on the next project and see what that sounds like.
Yeah, that'd be interesting to hear. I mean, that kind of stuff's really easy to overthink. Like, but the low end response, like, nah, it's just going to sound wide, bro. Like, do it. People have been doing that for a long time. There's a reason it works.
I feel like the problem is with rectos, like depending on the genre of music it is, there's like a threshold whereby the recto is completely appropriate. Depend on the genre. And if you're just a little bit not heavy enough for that, it sticks out too much. Like it's got a little too much fizz. It's a little too crusty. Oh, not crusty, that's the wrong way of saying it. But I feel like I straddle that line with the music I work on, where it's like I have people, sometimes I put up like the, I'm trying to think, well, maybe in the stiletto and the Marshall, and I get like a good amount of gain and they're just like, no, that's too much. Like turn the gain down. I'm like, all right.
Yeah.
It depends.
I can sympathize with that, where it's like, it's not going to be perfect for everybody. But in the cases it is, if you actually play real music, then it's always perfect. I saw a great video today, which was Uger Valaverta from YouTube, who I've spoken about before. He's like the older brother I never had. And he is playing, I think he's doing a demo of the Zach Wild 800 model.
Oh yeah.
And he does this bit at the end where he's like, I'm paraphrasing here, but it's basically like, they're unforgiving amps, but it will command you. You just have to command it. So like basically just play guitar properly and it's a good amp.
Yeah.
And he kind of laughs and he's like, yeah, I'm joking. I'm like, yeah, but you're also telling the truth.
There are amps like that, unfortunately. You really have to play to them. I don't know how I feel about those amps because I do enjoy the process. You know what? In the studio, if I'm playing it, then I'm completely cool with it. When I'm at a gig and I'm trying to make those amps work for me, I'm always like, oh fuck, I can't do all these things at once. If I'm trying to sing and then get the amp to work for me, I find that a little bit difficult. And it's also hard
it's got to be you're just playing guitar situation. Hey,
yeah. And then there's things with certain guitar players that I record where the gauge of pick is one really funny one where it's either way too heavy or way too light. And sometimes it's like the actual attack on the strings is way too light. It's funnily enough, I have that being more of an issue than people attacking too heavy. But like sometimes that's the key to the guitar sound, just like the way that you're hitting the strings. But I guess my point is like when you give people certain amps to play through, even though in your head it's the perfect sound, it just doesn't work with the attack. And it falls in a heap.
It's pretty interesting. Hey, yeah, it's the what like, and a lot of it has to do surely is like, you know, transient response, like, you know, a rectifier, the way the low end like kind of, I don't know. It has this like bloom to it, for use of a better term, whereas like a Mark Series amp doesn't do that. It's very direct.
Yeah.
You know.
And that bloom, like you can control that. If you're aware of how your right hand works, you can get that to do stuff for you. But if you're not conscious of it, if you're used to playing a certain type of Marshall amp or just like a lot of distortion without that amount of bottom, it's like tough. It's tough to do instantaneously. It's not going to take you like a year to learn, but yeah, it might take you just a couple goes, but you know, we're all conscious of time and stuff. It's bloody pain.
There's another question or comment that I saw on that video about the Daking mic preamps. What are you using those for?
I literally just read that. In fact, I'm going to read the comment to myself. Love seeing the Daking mic amps, incredibly underrated. No longer in production in 500 series. Used to use a Daking 4 in a studio I worked in, and the BA312s were the best guitar pre's I've ever used, but preferred the 512s.
Interesting.
Yeah. Okay. I completely agree with that. To answer your question, what am I using the Daking mic preamps on? So yeah, I guess you kind of saw them in the rack. For those of you, if you want to go check out the video, or if people may not give a shit, but I have a 500 series rack. It's a JLM 11 500 series rack in my rack of stuff. I have two Avitas MA5 preamps. I've got one JLM TG 500 mic preamp, two of the Dakings mic preamps, and then 6 of the classic API VP26s. So the VP26s are basically API style mic pre's, but they come in kits, so you can throw them. If you can use a soldering iron and follow instructions, you can make them yourself, and that's what I did. So as it turns out, there's what's that 4 different styles of mic pre's in that rack, as well as the Audient mic pre's, which also sound good, but I use them less. The Dakings, I actually shot everything out maybe 2 years ago. I preferred the MA5s. I think on guitars, they're my favorite. The MA5s and the JLM TG500, they're my preferred ones. I find that if I drive the mic preamps harder, like into distortion, I think I've actually showed this to you.
Yeah.
And I can do it. Interesting. Yeah, of the three of the 4 mic pre's I have, and the Daking isn't one of these, but the other 3 flavors that I've got in the rack, they have an input gain and then an output attenuator, like pot on the back on the end of it. So what you can do is like you can create distortion by just driving the shit out of the mic preamp, backing off the output, and then so you're not like clipping your converters and whatever as you run into Pro Tools or whatever. I find that if I drive the shit out of the MA5, it has a really pleasant sort of distortion and a real like hardness and edge and attack to the sound that I don't get when I run it cleaner. So it's one of those things that doesn't necessarily work for everything, but it's just that kind of that extra in your face saturated. I don't know if it's a transformer thing or whatever, but it gives me a relatively pleasant sound. And that's like nothing new. That mic pre is based off the Neve 1073 thing, apparently, which I've done that with Neves before as well, where you get like this certain point of saturation. So in terms of like clean, pristine audio, it's not really what you want, but in terms of giving vibe and character to a sound, it's absolutely what you want. I find that those sound the best. The TG500 also sounds really good, and it's got an impedance control on it as well, so you can change the flavor of it a little bit.
That's pretty cool.
Find the on guitars, I don't really love the Dakings as much. They're a little brighter, and that they have this sort of, at least to me, they had like almost like a tiny little quackiness about it. compared to the others, which probably in isolation it's easy to deal with. Like maybe if you just EQ'd the amp a tiny bit differently, or you put the mic in a slightly different position, you get away with it. But like lined up, like all these ones lined up, that was probably my least favorite. The classic API ones, I actually don't love them. I think they sound good. They sound fine. But I prefer the MA5s a bit more. They also sounded a little bit more, they didn't quite have the same sort of like body for whatever reason. But there's also a possibility that I just built them wrong. That's absolutely the truth. And I did actually notice that's
also on the table.
Yeah, and the thing is, like with kits, my soldering and my electronics expertise is limited. Like I said, I can follow instructions and I put stuff together and it's been able to work, and I've used it like in my recording for a really long time now. But like I think channel 1 of the first classic API in the rack there, I noticed it actually has a bit of like weird distortion, even though it's not clipping. It has a little bit of distortion in it, of which I thought it sounds like something is clipping along the chain. I swapped them to a different mic pre and that was gone. So there's clearly a bit of something going on in that one. So
just a little bit of how's it going.
Yeah, so you never know, but it's still having the output controller on it is really useful, so you can still drive it into saturation if you like. I think actually on those guitars we recorded last week, they were driven a little bit through the mic pre.
Yeah, right.
Not to the huge point of distortion, but a little bit. And if you have this capability in your own equipment, like where you can drive the front end a little bit harder and back off the volume so you don't clip, it's worth the experiment. Like I did it with the MA5s because they all have it's 10. What is it? 5? Yeah, 5 dB input. Like clicks on the input.
Yeah. That's
so
right.
I actually did it 5 dB at a time, backed the output gain off, and ran the same piece of audio through, so I could actually hear what it sounded like with an extra 5 dB of saturation. And there is a point when, like, if you really crank it to full, it fuzzes out in a kind of cool way, sort of like I guess what that JHS Neve pedal thing that he does.
Yeah, or the Hudson Broadcast or something. It's like
it's in that same sort of
distortion.
Exactly, it's in that same sort of level of thing. What's that last not King's Triple X? What's it called? What's the song? What's the
Follow the Leader?
Follow the Leader. So the last Ragdoll song that came out, which working title, it was King's Triple X. You can work out
to differentiate it from a different song, which is called King 69.
Yeah,
so we are all fully grown adults. Right here.
But that song, when I mixed it, I was experimenting a little bit with this transformer saturation thing. So they weren't in the rack, but I've got this pair of Purple Audio compressors, the Purple Audio Action compressor, and you can run it.
Those.
Yeah, you can run it so that, because it has I think it's got a transformer on the output or something. But you don't have to run it as a compressor. You can run it just for the transformers and drive those into distortion. So the main rhythm tracks on that song were ran through the Purple Actions, like driven really, really hard, and then run back into Pro Tools. Like that's how I use them in terms of outboard. So I actually found it. I hate to say this word. It sort of warmed up the tone of those guitars a little bit. I've got other ways of doing that now, but at the time it really gave the sort of missing character to what those guitar sounds were. And I really liked it. So yeah, I mean, who knows if it, I literally did it that one time, and then COVID hit, and then I kind of got distracted with other things, but yeah, it's a cool thing. If you got the capability to try it, it's definitely worth it, I suppose, is the takeaway.
It's certainly like a bit of a missing link thing sometimes, where, I've run into this, when was that? So I'm just gonna like name drop one of my favorite guitar players who flicked me a message on Instagram once.
Machine Gun Kelly.
Machine Gun Kelly. No, Machine Gun Loomis. Jeff Loomis. And I saw this message from Jeff Loomis. I'm like, why is Jeff Loomis messaging me? And we were talking about the band Loudness.
That's fucking sick.
A big fan. And, the song Crazy Nights.
Yep.
That tone at the start, he was like, I've got an Axe FX. What should I do to get that? So I was like, I just kind of sat here for a little bit, and I mess around with a bunch of stuff, and I kind of went A/B with it. And I felt like I got it pretty close, and I was like, there's just something else happening in that sound. Listening to the isolated intro on loop, and the cab block in the axe lets you have like tape saturation or transformer saturation. Can't remember if it was like one of the tape modes or the like Neve style transformer thing, but you kind of put that on, and it was that last little bit that just got you that hair. And it's clearly a really good old Marshall and a really good guitar player who knows their sound, but it's like it's hitting a console of some variety somewhere in the chain. There's just that extra little bit of sauce on there. And yeah, that was kind of the thing. So, I got a really nice message back from Jeff playing an Akira Takasaki star guitar, playing that song.
That's
and
awesome.
It was just like, just nailing it,
Wait, so what amp was it that you used for that?
I think the Atomica High.
Okay.
I think I did a video about it at some point. And Jeff's like a lovely, lovely human being and such a good player. Like, it's just, that they're a good player, but when you see them on like phone audio, just like playing stuff that you don't normally associate with them, like, you're actually very, very good at guitar.
Yeah, there was a period probably around 2006 when he was probably the best guitar player in the world, right? Like that's what everyone accepted.
Yeah, pretty much. What was that album? This Godless Endeavor, the Nevermore album?
Yeah, that was a cool. I really liked that album.
Man,
and was Chris Broderick in the band at that point too?
Chris wasn't in the band. There was a guy called Steve Smythe in the band.
Okay, I thought it was him. My bad.
I know Chris did join Nevermore.
Okay, he did.
At some point as a touring guitarist, and
then he joined Megadeth, right?
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's like a terrifying guitar combination. But yeah, 2005, 2006. I was in year 12, so it might have been 2005, and I remember rushing to JB Hi-Fi to buy that album.
Yep.
And
I remember rushing to LimeWire to download that album.
Yep. So if Jeff's listening to this one, Jeff Loomis, we love you. We'd love to have you on the show at some point.
And I did buy that album. I'm sure I have it on CD as well. So
I listened to it not too long ago, and it's really, really good. I'm pretty sure it's Andy Sneap.
Okay, yeah. Well, he was doing all that stuff at that time.
Of course, it crushes. But it was one of those, like, I remember it being sick at the time, and I thought I'd go back and listen to it and be like, oh, yeah, there's a bunch of stuff on here I'm not into, but it still stacks up, man. It's like the song Psalm of Lydia is just...
Oh, that was the one.
That's the coolest heavy metal song of the 2000 to 2010 of the you know what as well? It's pre-Gent, that album.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like technical progressive heavy metal that is not Gent. It's before all of that. And yeah, Jeff was like doing some cool stuff. Just his sound as well, like boosted rectos and 5150s, sort of an OG. I saw the Synergy video he did as well.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Sounded great. Like just, someone who gets it in a big way.
Yep.
In a very, very big way.
I did play the 6505. I think I told you about this, but I've had a little blast with the 6505 module in the last week, which was pretty cool. I threw it up against the 5150 and with my Syn 30 as well, so the Synergy module and the Syn 30, and they sounded pretty good. I probably still prefer the OG, but that's in an back-to-back AB, and I feel like I'm making excuses, which I don't mean to do that, but possibly different power section on that one. There was just that like girth that
the giant chungus that a 120 watt power amp gives you.
This is amp in the room versus a mic'd amp as well. So it was kind of like a bit more a feeling sort of thing. So I should, I've got it there. I will mic it up during the week and have a little bit of a play. But the tone was definitely there. Like the tone felt really good.
Yeah. That's really, really cool. Speaking of new stuff, did you see anything at the NAMM show that excited you?
Actually, there's two things, I guess, that happened. Two companies, not so much in the guitar sphere, but in pro audio. So the boring one, but that literally made me scream yes at my computer screen. It's like if anyone saw how excited I got about this one thing, it would have been really embarrassing. But Avid has a Thunderbolt option now for the Matrix series.
Oh, the modular thing they're doing?
Well, yeah, so there's a new Matrix interface. The Matrix, the original MTRX interface was like a fully modular thing where you'd have to put cards in it. Do you know how expensive it was for those cards, by the way?
I don't, but
to fully kit one out, it was
I don't think I'm going to be surprised at how ridiculous it is.
You might be, because to fully kit one out, you're talking like 25,000 American dollars.
Wow, American.
I think it was American, I'm pretty
dollary
sure.
dues.
Or maybe it was Australian, but whatever. It was really expensive, which is why the Matrix Studio, which like in Australian dollars was about $8,000, is still like maybe $7,000, but whatever. It's still very expensive, but it's a bit more affordable for the rest of us. But
yeah, commercial studio.
The new version of it has a few. So like the original one, you'd buy the chassis and then put the cards in it, and then the cards were like $3,000-$4,000 each or something. I think the new one has a bunch of stuff built into it already, so you can use it off the shelf. But the really cool thing is that it has Thunderbolt on it, which allows for more expansion of how the units can work in a setup, which is, it sounds really silly, but it's like, Avid has been so locked off with their hardware for so long, where it's like, if you want to get an Avid piece of hardware into Pro Tools, it had to go through a few hoops. Like my Matrix Studio at the moment goes down its own proprietary fucking DigiLink cable into a box which just converts that cable into Thunderbolt, but that box is something like $1,200 Australian to buy.
Yeah.
So in saying that, the Thunderbolt option card for my Matrix, which I think is available, is going to cost me about $1,200 to do. But it's just sort of it just ties everything in a little bit easier.
It's one less thing to connect. Yeah,
there's a few other features, like because for me to get computer audio into my speakers at the moment, like I have to use Dante Virtual Sound Card, which is kind of a pain in the ass, and there's a few issues with like sample rates changing, where if you change the sample rate for one, or like if I open up a Pro Tool session that's at 44.1 kilohertz, I won't be able to watch YouTube without going and like changing like a whole other piece of software, which it's like, it's not the end of the world to do that, but sometimes it just won't show up or it won't work, and then
but it's a bit of a song and a dance is what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's like at the moment I've got a $1,200 piece of external gear to connect all this shit up with limited options. It is kind of worth it to me just to drop in the new thing. Yep. If I was on HDX, it's different, but I'm not on HDX. I'm on HD native, and I don't really need that low latency and all that sort of stuff, so it's not too much of a problem. So that's exciting for me, and probably for a few people, probably not for too many people listening to this, but hey, that was exciting. And
I'm sure we have some audio enthusiasts amongst the Gear Podcast listening base. Make yourselves known. And
the more exciting thing for me, like in a more immediate thing, was some of the updates to SoundFlow, which I did.
Yeah.
I talked about that.
Actually pretty cool.
Yeah, I talked about that a little bit over the last few weeks. I think I demonstrated my little app on the video too, that I can control the amp selector with using that software. But the cool thing is, so Avid over the last like 6 months or something has really opened up access to their software that otherwise previously hasn't really been there, because it's all been pretty well locked off to develop. Or like you couldn't really access like Yukon stuff as far as I'm aware. Like that was all very proprietary to Avid.
Yeah, that's right.
So they updated their develop, like some of it goes over my head, so I'll apologize if I get it wrong, but they updated like the developer kit, or made it a bit more like accessible for Joe Blow to get involved with at all. But SoundFlow is now working very closely with Avid, so the partnerships there, like there's a bunch of SoundFlow stuff built into Pro Tools at certain levels of Pro Tools. The new announcements, firstly, you can use, like SoundFlow is going to be able to use the Stream Deck Plus, which came out about five or so months ago. So
is that the one with the knobs?
Yeah, so it's got like 4 knobs on the bottom, 8 buttons on the top, and then like a touch screeny sort of thing.
Like a scribble strip.
Yeah, so that's really cool, because as a plug-in controller, it will be awesome. So I should be able to I should be able to program a few things, like using, say, distressor plugins, and have the knobs automatically pop up. Because the way that SoundFlow works is like you can have, say, like a deck, like a series of buttons programmed on your Stream Deck to work with a specific plugin, but that deck will open up, so all the knobs and buttons on the deck will change as soon as the plugin is like attentioned or open on the screen. So it's just that immediate sort of, all right, I'm going to put a distressor on my snare drum, bam, there it comes up, and then all the controls are ready to go. So that's really cool. And then why this is also really great is that the Stream Deck Plus will now be able to control the DADman software that I use for all my monitor controller stuff, which that if you
it all just sounds like happy days.
It's all happy days, but that's like, so I use an iPad at the moment, which is a little bit dicky and a little bit finicky sometimes with the Dadman software, and that controls like volume up and down, sources for if I'm listening to Pro Tools on my Mac or whatever. But yeah, the Stream Deck Plus will be able to talk directly to that, so I'll have an actual physical knob for volume control, which can be really useful. So it's like, it's very boring, but the actual hardware monitor controller for the Dadman thing is like 2,000 Australian dollars.
Versus what, 400 or 500 for the Stream Deck?
$330 Australian for a Stream Deck, and plus the software, which I already pay for. So it's it's just way better. It'll do more things. And also there's apparently massive wait times on the monitor controller. Like they just aren't making them fast enough. So yeah, here's a $300 solution, which is way better. So those are the main two things. And like I think I've got to wait till May for the SoundFlow stuff to happen. And then as far as the other thing, like that's a medium term purchase. I'll just wait till they drop and pick one up eventually. What about you, Uncle Leon? So anything exciting Guitar Land?
Nothing I really want to run out and buy. I saw, what were a few things?
Well, the first thing I'd like you to talk about to me is the new UA pedals, because I believe you sent me a message with one as I was driving home from the studio after we recorded the podcast last week.
That's right. Yeah. So what have they done? They've got there's a dual compressor, which is pretty cool. And it has, it's basically the UA 610 preamp. And then, what was it, 2 or 3 compressor modes, but they're dual. So you can run like LA2A into 1176 and vice versa.
Yeah, I think the 3 compressor modes are 1176, LA2A, and a Dynacomp, if I'm not mistaken.
There you go.
And then
what more do you need out of life? Yeah, sorry, I'm finding this now and bringing it up. So that's called the Max. And they, let's see, Teletronics, LA2A, 1176, and Dynacomp. So yeah, there you go. That one, like the dual compression. So here's the thing, right? For the longest time, I was like, why would you want one compressor, let alone 2? Mate, slide guitar. Yeah. Like, just Lowell George, Little Feat, like wrote the book on how to get that sound. Also, that Sean Lane, like Jonas Hellborg, fretless thing he did? Like, you've seen videos of that. He's got this kind of sound on one of the live clips where it's like, so much sustain, but it's so clean, and 2 compressors. So
there you go.
There you go. This pedal will make you sound like Sean Lane.
Yeah.
Disclaimer, not going to do that.
I'm interested to see how that works in a guitar sense, because I'm really working out how compression works for me in that realm. An LA2A 1176 combo tracking and mixing and stuff, I use that a lot, like particularly for vocals. Usually 1176 first because it's a really fast attack. So for me, the way I use it is that'll get rid of a lot of the main spiky transient parts, and then I'll use the LA2A after that to even the sound out. But on a guitar, I don't know how that translates, or how, I'm sure it's usable, but I can't say, I don't have like a sonic signature in my brain where like, oh, cool, I'm going to get this sound by doing this one thing.
Yeah, I'm going to get that thing. I mean, I think of now the Origin Effects Cali 76.
Yeah, like that's
became a thing.
Yeah. But and the slide rig as well, that's 2 of their 1176 things together, as far as I'm aware.
Correct, right? Yeah. And kind of like an easy way to tweak them so that it works. And that's something that's pretty cool. The main thing with like an 1176, because it's JFET based, is like it distorts at extreme values, and that's kind of why you like it on guitar. It's like it's like what we were talking about earlier with the mic pre's. You get this thing that's not a like op amp based distortion thing. It's just got a cool character, and yeah, the 11, like I've still got that Cali 76. It's a cool pedal for
sounds awesome.
For certain things. If I was doing a gig, what's a vibe is telly into a deluxe reverb. That's a country gig. There you go. You've got the rig.
Well, we did that at your place. Remember, a year ago, like I came around and we had a little blast with that exact setup, and it sounded awesome.
They have back to UA, they have the Galaxy Tape Echo. So it's just their, I'm guessing, Roland RE201 emulation, which sounds pretty good. And I mean, the one that looks particularly interesting to me is the Delverb. It's like seafoam green with brown knobs. So it's a pretty how's it going aesthetic. But it is basically the 3 modes from the, what do they call it? I want to say the Starlight.
Oh, yeah.
Is that their delay pedal?
I think so, yeah.
And then 3 modes from the Golden with sort of like fewer knobs to twist on there. I mean, like the 224 and the Golden's one of the best reverb pedals out there, like despite its kind of shortcomings in terms of like saving presets and the app and a bunch of other stuff I could complain about. But it sounds so good. Like the 224 on it is amazing. It's one of my favorite reverbs. It's just like, it just has a character that you don't get out of the Big Sky, you don't get it out of the Mercury 7, you don't get it out of anything else. It's like they've clearly modeled the internal like 12-bit stuff that's going on.
Well, there's really a UA, there's a 224 plugin that they've done for years, so it's right there.
It's that. They've got the EMT 140 plugin basically ported in there, which sounds great. And the spring reverb on there is probably one of the best spring reverbs I've heard out of a non-actual spring reverb. I don't love spring reverb, but it's really, really good. And then on the delay side, the Starlight, like there's an Echoplex and there's a precision delay, which is a clean delay line. But the Deluxe Memory Man on there, again, sounds so good. And on the Starlight, you've got like an input gain and an output level control, so you can like hit the preamp of it kind of harder. And the I really like on the Golden and on the Starlight, like the way they voice the modulation is just like, it's actually voiced to make music with. It's not one of those things where like, oh yeah, the modulation goes up to 10 hertz on a reverb. It's like, okay, no one actually wants that. It's just kind of there. So both of those in one, I think that's kind of a no-brainer. It's going to be a no-brainer for a lot of people.
I was super excited about those because I was looking for a delay / reverby thing for my board like 3-4 months ago when I was thinking about setting some stuff up. But there wasn't really, like, there's a couple of cheapies like the Nuix Atlantic I thought looked kind of cool.
Yeah, that's actually pretty good, especially for the price.
But then there's other stuff where it's like when you get up there, you may as well just find an Eventide H9 secondhand, or
pretty much.
Or I've got the HX Stomp and all that, but this one seems sort of up my alley. Like it's obviously high end. The sound of it's really good. The features are really good. So I'd probably get a bit more love out of that, I think. But
I saw, I mean, the Starlight and the Golden, they're just really, really good. So it makes sense to have them in one. My main criticism is that there's a bunch of under the hood parameters that are there that you can't tweak. You need the app and you need to select specific presets. It's really dumb, Troy. I actually kind of, the more I think about it, the more I get annoyed by it. And it's also such a universal audio thing to do. Like, we're going to make stuff that sounds really, really great, but we're also going to like build a big wall around this beautiful garden in here, and only our DSP engineers can change it because you guys are idiots. And who would actually want to tweak the modulation rate? It's like, yeah, fair enough. Most guitar players are idiots, but I want to tweak that.
Yeah, Leon's an idiot.
Don't hold it from me, Universal
Don't
Audio.
You know who I am? That's what you should email them right now. Don't you know who I am?
It's a very anti-Leon kind of thing. So that's probably in general a very good thing for guitar players.
Can I just I was teaching yesterday and I went into a big thing about phase. And and it was a really interesting discussion. And then one of my students brought up this really good point about the way the waveform looks, and asking about drawing peaks onto a waveform. Like, why can't you just make something not clip by drawing like a little cap on it, you know? And which is fair enough. But I was kind of like,
welcome to audio synthesis, mate.
Yeah,
that's basically what it is.
I ended up saying, you know what you need to do? You need to look up the Fourier transfer or transform. Is that what it's called? Yeah.
You can call it a transfer, or you can call it a transform.
But I said that word.
Transform,
yeah. But like Fourier, is that how you say it?
Yeah, it's. I mean, that's how my dad says it.
Yeah.
That's how I grew up hearing it. But I believe it probably should be pronounced Fourier.
Oh, well, no, I was not going to do that.
Joseph Louis Fourier was the mathematician. But yeah,
Well,
I'm going to stick with Fourier because it's easier to say for me.
Yeah.
As a non-native francophone.
Well, you're eating your croissants.
You're eating your croissant. You're earning your good coin from the mine. You're doing your Fourier transform. So,
well, because
I've just offended the entire nation of France.
Well, so. I was sort of mentioned that because, well, maybe I won't get too technical about this because partly it might embarrass me for my lack of knowledge on this. But I also went on like, who's really smart is my friend Leon. And like, I was just saying to my students how it's like, part of the reason I even got onto this whole phase thing is because the amount of phase shift of an EQ was the thing that was keeping me up at night last week or a few days ago.
We were talking about this last week with those minuscule surgical cuts.
Absolutely. I was using Plugin Doctor to test some stuff, and that's a story for another time. But then I was mentioning you and about how, you go through these similar things too, where like we'll have a chat and we're talking all of a sudden it's like, yeah, the Fourier transform, that's why this and this and this, and we'll, that I think that was a discussion that we had maybe 3 years ago, when that was the thing, that was the obsession of the week.
Yep, that was the obsession of the week. I think because I wanted to, I did lots of maths at university and I did a unit on control systems, and they kept using this term unit impulse and impulse response, and we did Fourier transforms and we did Z transforms and we did Laplace transforms. And this stuff is like magic. It's basically, if mathematicians are really mathemagicians, then these are like just they're your 3 standard spells you cast and it just fixes stuff, Mm-hmm. You're like, oh yeah, well you just do this transform and then, it's easy. Moving between, and terms like phase as well. They just like, I could use the language. I don't think I understood it at a deep level until I started learning more about digital audio and how stuff was implemented.
Yeah.
And I remember like reading some paper on impulse responses, just being as deep down the rabbit hole as you can and being like, hang on, I remember this stuff. And it was one of those like, oh yeah, I'm not practiced, but I could probably speak this language if I just had to do this for a year. Mm-hmm. I could probably get back on track with it. And yeah, there's just lots of stuff where you're just like, oh yeah, of course, that's how you do it. Like especially the fast Fourier transform it's like one of the most useful things human beings have ever invented. This is up there with Troy. This is up there with like
AFL,
Simpsons. Simpsons. It's the gunpowder, the wheel. It's really up there. Slings for babies.
Sliced bread,
the automatic bread slicer. It's a beautiful thing. So yeah, maths is fun stuff when you have something to apply it to.
Yeah.
But yeah, the UA stuff, that's pretty cool. I saw Sound Toys have Super Plate.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yeah, so it's like
that's interesting.
Update, like a really expanded version of Little Plate.
Oh, do you know what fucking pisses me off about Little Plate is that there's no pre-delay in that.
Well,
it's the
Troy,
thing that
maybe
stops me
Super
from
Plate
using
is for
it.
you.
Yeah, but how much does it cost?
Well, I'll let you know right now, mate. While I'm talking about that, Beyerdynamic gave the M series a facelift, so the M88, the M160. Yeah,
interesting.
I don't know what they've done, but I'm clicking on things. So Super Plate. Looking at the controls, you've got classic 140, you've got the 240, a couple of other modes in there. There's an output EQ, there's auto decay. Is there a pre-delay? Yeah, there's pre-delay, modulation, low and high filters. So it's a properly expanded version of Little Plate. And if you want to trade up from Little Plate, $59.
That's not too bad. Look, the thing is, I have so many reverbs that it's the last thing that the last time I got duped with a reverb was DDMF Magic Verb, yeah, which is a very good sounding reverb, but I thought it was going to change my life and it is very good, but I also have so many other ones to go with. At the end of the day, Valhalla is pretty much all I need.
Valhalla's pretty darn great.
And because I was going to say, when you were talking about the UA stuff and the 224, because Arturia just released a 224 reverb as well.
Yeah, I saw that.
We just saw that. I was like, oh, it's probably on sale for release, but I just don't I'm very unexcited about another plate reverb or another, digital reverb, 2C4 recreation or something, because they're just in everything. It's hard. Well, look, not hurt them, but it's hard to think about how much better they could be right now than what they were 3 weeks ago. There's still algorithms in like deverb kind of that are useful. I still like the non-lin sound in deverb. I use that quite a bit. So,
like, Sean Costello cracked it. Like, he's, when it comes to like the vintage reverb stuff, is like, Sean knows what's up, and Valhalla stuff is and probably always will be like $50. So
just
I've watched some like lectures and just stuff with Sean, and I've been like, I'm gonna give you my money. Like, you seem like an absolute champion dude. So
I bought Valhalla Room about 14 years ago. It was like maybe one of the first reverbs I bought, and $50 for a plugin really was tough to part. For any plugin was tough to part with, and I didn't immediately love it, to the point when I didn't start messing around with it again till a couple of years ago. And then I was like, oh, there's actually some presets in this and some things about it that do the sound that I've been looking for in other reverbs, but I didn't realize that was what I needed to do. And it's just like, it's in my effects template that I've got a bunch of Valhallas that just do the thing. So
I remember doing a session for someone, and like going to their studio, and they just wanted me to, I was literally there to play a guitar solo. And they said, like, what do you want? Do you want some delay or reverb? And I was like, yeah, just give me some delay or reverb, whatever. And they just put Valhalla Room on.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember it was the first time I'd ever heard a reverb plugin where I was like, whoa, what is this? It just sounded so good.
Yeah.
And I think that whatever preset they just loaded up ended up making it on there. It was pretty like, yep, there you go. Well, that sounds pretty good.
Let me just say, the Sound Toys one, so $59 for another plate, that's all well and good. I think the thing that is a bummer for me, and the reason I mentioned the pre-delay, it's like, it's one of the most useful knobs on a reverb, in my opinion. Like, it's as necessary as the decay.
100%.
Little plate is otherwise such a perfect, easy reverb where it's like, great, how much reverb do you want? This much. Done. But it's just like,
plate, man.
That is way more useful than another tweakable, like, fucking plate reverb. I really could care less about that. I just wish they put that one knob on there. Same as with fucking Devil Lock, which is an amazing saturation distortion. It's a mega compressor sort of thing. But I just wish there was an output control on it.
Which is always so loud.
Yeah, it's always so loud as soon as you chuck it on. But it sounds awesome. But then I've got to it's not one where you can be like, oh, I'm going to bypass now and see what it sounds like. It's going to be completely different. So, fuck you. Actually, one more Grumpy Troy thing.
Yep.
On my UAD Fatso plugin, there's no link for input and output controls, as far as I can tell. And same as on the Distressor one. Like, it would be so much easier to just have that level match thing. It's on so many other pieces of so many other compressors and stuff these days. I don't know why they didn't incorporate it, unless it's a hidden thing that I just haven't seen. It's possible.
Yeah, unless we are in fact the idiots. It's like, I did that Tone X review during the week. Man, IK, it's, what are you doing with your software? There's just a few things which are dumb and excusable if this stuff came out 20 years ago, but actually just pure, like, it, that sometimes, and I kind of bring this up, and I kind of feel like that sometimes, as much as I love like the UA stuff, sometimes I feel like there is someone just sitting there laughing and cackling that they purposefully don't do this, because it's at the point where it's like, it's so obvious and it's so requested. The fact that it's not there can only be like pure malfeasance. That's the word for it. It's just like, there's just someone sitting there going, nah, we're not going to give you a pre-delay and little play. No, we're not going to give you cab lock high and low cuts because I don't want to do them. And the more you ask, the less we're going to do it. So
that's why there's no ADA MP1 in the Axe effects.
Yeah, I've complained about that plenty of times. I've not even complained. I just bring it up because I love how many people are like, oh, come on, Cliff. Mate, just there's things in there which sound so much better in there. I even went to the point where like I measured my ADA and I figured out this is what you do when you don't have a life, kids. I found like the maximum and minimum range, and like, you know, when you go to like -8 on the mids, what it actually is in dB. It's about -8.88 dB or something. So like I went through and figured out all the steps and looked at the schematic, and I even had someone on my Discord who's like a DSP engineer look at the schematic and tell me what I read wrong. And, you know, it's just a 4-band active EQ with like a high and a low shelf and, you know, a few and 2 peaking filters. Pretty easy. The center frequencies are there in the schematic. I measured them. They don't quite measure to what the schematic is, which makes sense because, you know, it's old stuff. And it's like, it's a fixed Marshall style tone stack. Yeah, I don't know, use the Atomica High. And it worked really, really well. It sounds like kind of close enough. It's just amp parametric EQ cab. And it sounds great.
Yep. It's actually interesting you bring some of that up, because I was going to suggest that we have a little episode soon about amp EQ.
Yeah.
It might be something
awesome.
that
tone stacks
tone stacks. That makes sense that's how that works on the ADA as well. I kind of assumed that was the case, but that
sounds like we should do it with Jason Tong from Headfirst.
Yeah.
Kind of podcast.
I think that's something we should bring up with him when we have the opportunity, because I have some honest questions, and I think it's very overlooked in the guitar community how those things how they work. And also, it's like one of those things. If you're a guitar player, this is a legitimate thing that happens a lot. If you're a guitar player and you decide to get into pro audio, and you have the option of getting a solid state mic preamp in quotes or a tube mic preamp in quotes, which one do you think is the best one?
And which one do you think guitar players are immediately going to choose?
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like you can go and buy a $100 Behringer like valve in quotations preamp, and think it's going to be the warmest, juiciest, just like my Fender Deluxe Reverb thing, when in reality, like, most of the good shit is not a fucking valve preamp. I mean, those are definitely there. Like, good valve equipment is unreal, but it's not the thing that you think is on all your favorite albums. Like, It doesn't translate. And the same thing goes in reverse. Like, if you're an audio engineer and then you go to like the EQ settings on a Marshall amp and just try and like tweak the mids a little bit and tweak the treble, it's like, it's not what you think it is. It's not working the way I think it is.
I would compare it is, you know, I think I really got into cooking when Elspeth moved here. And one of the first, like, if you're going to get into cooking, you know, a pretty easy thing to start with, start by making different pasta sauces, because you'll learn stuff about how to cook, and there's like templates for how to cook them.
Put a bit of milk in there.
Hey, mate.
That's what I reckon.
You're looking at the king of put a bit of milk in there. I've been doing that a lot with, you know, like you do a steak and you do a pan sauce, but
everybody, Leon knows how to do a pan sauce. Let me tell you, I can't. But
it's not hard.
You want a pan sauce? Uncle Leon is the ticket.
Anyway, normally I just chuck a bit of cream, bit of garlic, bit of pepper. And Troy, the secret is Massel vegan chicken stock.
Okay.
I didn't even know it was vegan chicken stock. It's just not made from real chickens, apparently. But it's a really good stock powder. And you just put a little bit of that. You put a bit of the stock powder in there.
Yep.
And I felt like an absolute filth unit doing that. Like, but it just kind of makes everything really well. And then there's a video with Marco Pierre White where he like did these videos for a stock cube company, and he's just putting stock cubes on everything. And he keeps going, it's up to you. Use as much as you like. It doesn't matter. It's your, like, they're actually, even though those videos are about cooking, they're just lessons for life. Because, you know, here's a guy who's done it all as a chef. And, you know, the classic Marco meme is, you know, he made Gordon Ramsay cry, which speaks to a lot about the culture in kitchens, I guess. But, you know, now he's just out there having a fat time cooking steak for himself, rubbing a stock cube into it. Knorr, K-O-N-O-R-R. Look up those videos. They're like the best thing on how to do anything. Anyway, I really got into that, cooking pasta sauces. Then, like, I had a pasta sauce my mum cooked, which was just like chucking it together. And it just destroyed anything I'd tried, like I'd cooked myself to that point. And it made me realize, it's like,
you cried.
Yeah, you know, just because I cried big time when I tasted it because it was so damn good. It's one of those things where it's like, you know, just because you think you know what's going on, like you can't discount. Like to me, my mum cooking is just a person using a guitar amp, and they know their amp.
Yep.
And you know, like, yeah, she's not working in a commercial kitchen or anything, but like she just cooks amazing food.
Yeah, your mum's a great cook, and there's always food in that house too.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. You know, I don't have like 30 years of cooking for like 5 people every single day, a couple of times a day. Like that's experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, that's the home cook is the guitar player, and the audio engineer is the Michelin chef, and they can both learn something from one another, I think.
Yeah. I will say veggie stock, I don't like veggie stock.
Like the stock powder, or buying it?
The stock powder. Like I feel like that's one thing, just to close this off. Whenever because we do HelloFresh once in a while, and whenever there's veggie stock powder in something, I always taste it immediately. I'm always like, oh, it's got veggie stock powder in it. And that and fucking celery. I can't stand celery.
You don't like celery? Interesting.
No, I really don't. I taste that immediately as well, and it almost always puts me off something.
Yeah, interesting. Interesting. Yeah. Celery's I can understand why it's a bit divisive. Have you tried Vegeta?
No.
We're really getting into it here. So
no, I'm just thinking about Final Flash, and
yeah. So it's spelt the same as Vegeta, but basically Vegeta is what all the Slavs use in their cooking, and my mum's used it forever. Just chuck a bit of Vegeta in it. I'm pretty sure it's a vegetable stock. They might make a chicken stock, which is funny based on the name. But we have some friends in Melbourne. And shout out to Vin, because Vin has a podcast, and I was telling him about this when we were in Melbourne last time. Hopefully he's listening to this, but Vin and Lil, and Vin's Italian and Lil is Croatian, and they invite us over every single time we're there and just like cook insane food, make coffee for us. We have the best time talking about like melodic rock from the 80s and all these obscure bands. And Cam pointed out that Vin kind of looks like Paul Stanley, so we just refer to him as Paul Stanley. And they're just like the best people. But Vin was making this chicken, and I was like, bro, what have you seasoned this chicken with? It's some of the best chicken I've ever eaten in my life. And he was like, mate, Vegeta. What else should I season it with? So yes, if you're from Southern Europe, basically, you know, you probably use a bit of Vegeta on there. So
what's a Kakarot?
What's a Kakarot? I feel like I read a while ago that's like, isn't that a Japanese word for something?
Is it?
Mate, we need to answer these questions about life. So anyway, Ibanez put out a bunch of guitars that look like, this is my NAMM rap. Yep. Ibanez put out a bunch of stuff that looks like all the other Ibanez stuff.
Yeah, don't care.
You know,
DigiTech's back though. Is that true?
DigiTech is back. Yeah, that's cool. Actually kind of cool. I think with like, they kind of got the band back together. So Tom Van Cram, it was
Ross Lyon going back to St Kilda.
Man,
he's getting the boys together.
Basically the same thing. And I've seen Tom's on the Gear page and on the Gear forum as well. So they were writing a lot about it. But that's kind of cool.
I didn't actually say. I know that it's happening, but what have they got product wise? Is stuff launched, or is it just we're back? Everybody,
I'm actually not 100% sure, but I think it's like all the stuff. Because see, I didn't realize this until a while ago. Like the Polara reverb and stuff like that. Because Harman owned Digitech, who owned Lexicon.
Yeah, it's all the same company.
So it's like they had a few pedals had Lexi chips in them.
Yeah.
So you want a sick reverb? Just go and get one of these things.
I think I want to say Soundcraft as well is in that group, and JBL as well. Like it's all the same company.
There you go.
Same as
awesome.
Actually not the same as, but not that interesting of a side note. The effects in a Marshall AVT, I can tell you that they have an Alesis chip in them.
Really?
Yes.
Ah, that's kind of interesting.
I remember seeing that a long time ago when I had the AVT. Or at least the AVT 100 from the 2000s. Go on.
I want to say that Alesis chip may be just a very widely commercial DSP, because I'm pretty sure all the Earthquaker Devices pedals use that same chip.
Oh, okay.
There's like...
It's old. It's 20-something years old.
Yeah. So there's the Alesis chip, and then I think there's the Shark and the Tiger Shark, and maybe one other thing. And it was a bit of a like meeting of the minds thing, where all these different companies actually got together and like spec'd out these things.
Because that Shark chip, so when this is about 2009, when the UAD2 came out, in that, 2008, 2009. I believe that all the UAD is Shark, isn't it? Does that sound right to you? Yeah, because that was a big deal. It was like, that was in all the advertising, is like using these Shark chips. I didn't really understand it too much at the time. I guess I probably don't understand it that much now. But what was the point of my story? I remember like reading articles that were like, basically once those original UAD cards, like, because they were cards at the time, had come out, all this Shark stuff was also incredibly obsolete in terms of its specs, like, because everything moves so quickly.
Yeah,
but
I know one of the head engineers, maybe the head engineer at Source Audio, worked for Kurzweil.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to remember their name. I feel like it's a Bob, and basically I don't know if they helped design these chips or they were a consultant for it, but it's a pretty interesting, there's like some interesting stuff around the whole like development of those chips, and the fact that you could fit them in pedal-sized enclosures as well. Like, kind of, that's why after that point in the early 2000s, suddenly you had digital pedals everywhere that were really, really good. So yeah, that's Bob Chidlaw.
Okay.
That is, he was from Kurzweil. So I've got a thing called the Kurzweil Rumor here, which is a reverb, really, really cool. They made something called the Rumor and the Mangler and the KSP-8, and the KSP-8 is basically like, it was Kurzweil's version of an Eventide H.
Yeah,
like,
there was a period,
powerful.
early Gear Space, if you were looking for like a hardware reverb, because I mean, we talk about digital reverbs for a minute there, like late 2000s, there was still accepted that there was no good reverb plugins. And so people are still saying, no, you've got to go and buy a Lexicon or a whatever. But that one came up a lot because it was comparatively affordable to like a bunch of Lexicon stuff or whatever. So yeah, I never used one, but I'm aware of that being a decent sounding unit.
So thanks to the magic of the World Wide Web,
World Wide
Web, sing that to maybe that could be our theme song to the tune of Wild Wild West. So check this out, mate. This is pretty interesting. Sigma DSP. This is the thing that I have been trying to find. So yeah, Sigma DSP. So Analog Devices, do they make the Shark and the Tiger Shark?
Oh, possibly. Yeah.
Yeah, mate. Here we go. Get this. So I'm going to do a very brief overview of this. I did want to talk about something else on today's podcast, but I think
we can do it. We can probably get there from this. I think.
Oh, there you go.
But keep going, mate. Just keep going. Just do you.
So this is going to tie into what we wanted to talk about. So in 2005, basically this chip came out that's smaller than a nickel or maybe a dime. I'm trying to look at it. It's like a tiny little thing. So basically, like up until the 90s, trying to get these DSPs really, really small wasn't happening. So Analog Devices Shark and Blackfin range, there was a new dedicated, basically audio DSP chip. Roger Smith and ex-Kurzweil engineer Bob Chidlaw were an integral part of the Sigma DSP chipset team. Roger saw the potential in putting their new streamlined, efficient, extremely high-quality Sigma DSP chips to work in guitar pedal, and with Bob's help, they went on to create Source Audio.
Well, there you go.
There you go. That's where Source Audio comes from, because they were kind of like an out of nowhere company. Those original the pedals were really interesting.
They were weird looking, because remember the multi-band distortion? Is that the one that we tried?
Sound blocks.
Yeah,
I think that's what it was called.
They didn't sound good. Like, they had a sound, but it was like, because they were plastic as well, that the enclosures were plastic. Yeah, they had a real cheap sort of like gimmicky vibe about them. Like the form factor was really strange. Which one have you got? It's not the distortion one, is it? The synth one or something like that?
No, it's the multi-band distortion one.
Oh, it is one. Because I had that on my baseboard for a little bit.
The something wave. I know they've got the ultra wave out now, which is in like a normal pedal, which is amazing. Such a good pedal. The opposite of UAD, you can deep dive on the editor with that one and do some there's multi-band compression, there's EQs, there's LFOs. It's so powerful. So some other, I'm quoting this from noisegate.com.au, by the way, which I believe They also have a YouTube channel. I believe they're connected to CMI here in Australia, who I do some work with, which is pretty cool. So Strymon and Meris have opted to use a 32-bit Shark range of chips. That makes sense. That fits. Here's the fun side note, mate. We're talking about Sean Costello from Valhalla DSP. Sean worked at Analog Devices and helped set up Universal Audio with the development tools to create UAD2 on Shark chips.
Well, there you go, mate.
There you go.
The moon is just the sun at night.
Yep. The Blackfin chip family is used by Empress and Electro Harmonics. So yeah, basically Analog Devices. So yeah, I think pretty much Analog Devices, you know, were dominating that. I know the AXFX3 uses a Texas Instrument chipset, which I have seen, and to quote Cliff, is basically like, it's really hard to code for. There's, with all of these chipsets, my understanding is that basically like there's dev kits for them. So, you know, you don't have to be like across it. Well, you need to know how to do DSP engineering, but you know, you kind of do it more or less in the box.
Yep.
And yeah, the Texas Instrument chips in the AXFX3 are like way more powerful than any of the Analog Devices stuff that's in pedals, but hard. So that's why the AXFX is like so overpowered compared to some of this stuff. And I guess the flip side is that you can just afford to, you want to run these super high quality algorithms, you just go for it in there. So yeah, which leads me to what I want to talk about, which is kind of a very brief overview of digital modeling.
Just pause for 1 second. Is there anything else from NAMM worthwhile talking about? Are we happy with that?
Oh, I'm pretty happy with that.
I'm happy with that. Yeah, NAMM done, dusted, in the box, in the books.
Did.
Well, Uncle Leon, this episode's been going on a little bit. We've got a lot more to talk about. So how about we break it up right here and we'll reconvene tomorrow morning. How does that sound to you, mate?
I think that sounds like the perfect way to end part 1 of this podcast. And tune in tomorrow for part 2.
Peace. The Geek Podcast with Troy and Leon. Uncle Leon, we're back, mate. How was your night?
It was a brilliant evening, Troy. 24 hours passed in the blink of an eye. Welcome to part 2 of our discussion, where we're just really digging into some stuff that we like to talk about. As always, if you're a fan of the podcast, you can follow us on Instagram and you can subscribe in your favorite podcast app. So, Troy, shall we dive straight back into it and pick up where we were yesterday?
Ripper dipper. Here we go.
What I really wanted to talk about was kind of like a very brief bird's eye view of digital modeling, because, Troy, I bought a Roland GP100 this week.
Look at you.
Which is basically the first commercially available product to use what we now know as digital modeling. And I'm going to quote, I'm drawing from, I've got resources for today's episode. So
need your bibliography up on the screen?
I got my bibliography. I'm quoting this from a thread on thegearforum.com with Eric Klein, who is the head of Yamaha Guitar Group. So Line 6, all that kind of stuff. Very active on a lot of forums. Basically, Eric wrote this list talking about, like revolutionary products in the guitar space. And their, I guess you want to say, criteria is it's something that hadn't really existed in the space before, and its functionality is now widespread across the industry. So, and they make the point that Line 6 has been kind of at the center of all of it. But the first thing, basically, first one off the block, the Roland GP100, basically the first product to be a digital amp modeler. So it has a preamp in there, and it's got knobs on there, which is kind of cool. But it's a digital preamp that's specifically aimed at replicating classic guitar amps. So there's not a super wide selection in there, but you have, JC120, Marshall Plexi, there's a Soldano, there's a 5150, there's a matchless model.
Exact same culprits as now.
The exact same stuff that everybody else is doing. This is in 1995. So what, 28 years ago?
Yep.
And anyway, I bought this GP100 because one of my friends, Matt, who works at Fractal Audio, has mentioned several times that he had a GP100 in his gigging rig. And like, Matt's owned every cool piece of gear ever. And yeah, basically had mentioned the GP100. I was kind of aware of it because Devin Townsend was still using one up until fairly recently, just for some delay things in there.
I'm not that familiar with the unit, to be honest. I feel like I've seen pictures of it, but that's about it.
Yeah, so for me, I was...
Is it just amps? Does it have effects in there as well?
It's got effects in there as well. So it's sort of like an evolution of the GP8 and the GP16.
Mm-hmm.
The GP8 was just a single rack unit, and it pretty much just had a bunch of... It was literally, they just crammed Boss pedals into there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an EQ, a compressor, a chorus, a delay. Pretty sure there's an overdrive and a distortion. Like, it's basically got a DS1 and a CE3 and a DD3 literally on this giant circuit board. So it's
right, okay.
It's got analog drives in it, and then there's a digital section in there. And there's a lot of people who still swear by those. And so
really, Mick Thompson, right? Isn't he into those?
I think so. And I think also the guitar player from Nile still uses one.
Okay.
And so, yeah, there's like people who love the GP8, and you can still get them really, really cheap. Then there was the GP16, which was all digital. Then the GP100 added, now it's got proper like amp and speaker simulation in there. And then there's compressors and delays, and it's like the whole kit and caboodle, basically.
Yep.
The tap delay in it is really cool because you basically specify, it's got, so you know what it is, Troy? You've used the AX8.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's like a quad tap delay in there, a multi-delay. Essentially the same thing.
Right.
So yeah, it's like, it really is ground zero. And the architecture on it, you can see is sort of the way stuff like, you can move things around and change the block order.
Yep.
So yeah, that, like the GP100, man, I grew up with, my dad had a Roland VG8, the 13-pin thing.
Yep.
And so I've been like around that ecosystem for a long time. That did guitar modeling and stuff like that. I don't remember it sounding as good as the GP100. Like,
yeah, right.
I plugged it in using the built-in speaker sims, going direct. There's some sounds in there which you sort of go, okay, yeah, that's definitely 5150-ish. But some of the clean sounds in there are awesome. The Marshall in there's pretty decent. The Soldano in there's pretty decent. The built-in speaker sims are not bad. Like, the feel thing isn't really there. You could gig it. You might not have the best time. The effects are great, like really high quality. And it's the encoders I've gotten are busted, but someone's made like a third-party, software editor, which only works on Windows. So I spent like 4 hours yesterday trying to get boot camp on my old Mac Mini, thinking I'll just run it as a Windows machine. Should have just done it and got Parallels, which I ended up using.
Yep.
Anyway, this thing, I got it hooked up. I got the USB to MIDI cable. Why isn't it working? It's all saying it's connected. Did a factory reset on the Roland. Now, this to me is just the most Roland thing ever. It's using MIDI. What do you think would be a good default setting to have as a MIDI channel, Troy? Maybe MIDI channel number 1 would make sense.
Yep.
So I've spent hours trying to get this to work, trying everything, installed Parallels on my laptop as well. The default is MIDI channel 2. That was it.
Oh, right. Well,
that's all I needed to change. I set it to 2, and now I can drive this thing remotely. And it's so much fun. There's some presets on there which are so awesome as well, like these kind of panning string things. And so the GP100, I can't wait to do a video with it because it's really, really fun. Now, basically, apparently the story is, at the same time, unbeknownst to Roland, Line 6 were coming up with the Axis, which was their digital modeling amp.
Can I just ask quickly, because you plugged it in, like using the speaker, and what did they call it? Speaker emulation?
Speaker simulator, yeah.
Okay. Just on its surface, purely without A-Bing it, but from your brain, JMP1 direct or this one direct, what do you think sounds better?
Well, there's like options in the GP100 to have like center, cap, and edge.
Okay, that's really interesting.
Which is kind of cool. So I think the JMP one's just a fixed.
But you've gigged with that though, direct. So I'm curious to think what.
Honestly, I'm without comparing them. Like the GP100 is at least as good, if not better, in terms of the speaker sims.
Okay.
And then you've got like boogie models, and there's some stuff in there which is passable. I disabled them and used IRs, and like the IRs a lot better, but plugging in, I was like, this shouldn't be this good, you know? And just like the feature set and everything, it's so like, it is ground zero for digital modeling. You're like, oh, this is why so much stuff still gets done like this.
Yep.
And there's a few things in there where it's like, it almost kind of feels like, yeah, they, like with Roland and Boss, like they almost went backwards for a long time with some of it. But it's pretty cool. The effects are really good amount of tweakability without being too crazy. Then there's the Line 6 Axis. So that's an actual amp. It came out a little bit after the GP100, but I think it was just developed in parallel. So they're probably the first two. But that was a whole amplifier system.
I've seen those before, like in person. I don't remember where, but I've definitely seen them. Would be a couple of years ago now. I never played through them though, but I reckon there's a couple floating around the town.
There's that, and then there's the Johnson J Station and Millennium.
Yep.
Which are like, I want to say the Johnson maybe was around the same time as the Pod. Obviously, the Pod's the big one that most people would be like, that's where it all really took off with modeling.
Yeah. So the Axis, that's what it's called, the Line 6 one, right?
Yep.
So is that just, it's effectively like, think of like a pod, but then it has a power amp built into it, and you plug that. Is it a head and cab thing, or is it a combo? I feel like I've seen a combo.
I think it was a combo, yeah. Which it has this big menu on it. So it's...
Yeah, on the front, right? It's like a massive big menu thing on the front.
Massive menu, and it's sort of like amp models. There's nearly 20 amp models. You have amp style controls. There's a delay and reverb control. And then you can like probably, I think it's maybe you press a button to go through all the options, like, you know, compression level, volume pedal on enough, tremolo speed, chorus speed. So it's got all this stuff built in that you can tweak as well. It's like a pretty ominous looking thing as well.
And then that was also mid 90s, right? Like 96, 7, 8.
Yeah. So you got like let's say mid 90s, really, this stuff kind of begins, but then the Pod's 1998.
Okay.
And that's I think for most people, they would be like, that's the real beginning of, you know, because people use pods on commercial recordings.
Yeah, they were massive, man. Like, they were always seemed unaffordable to me.
I remember wanting one really, really bad, and it was just like, no, it was really expensive.
Yeah. But they were still being, like, I know people that still use the OG Bean Pod, like, into the 2000s, like 2010s, sorry, and it was still okay.
Todd Rundgren still uses them. I
mean, if it gives you the sound, like, I've definitely tried them, having used other digital stuff and obviously other amps and whatnot, and being like, oh, this is a bit janky. But yeah, I mean, it's all in one. You got your delays and your reverbs and your effects, and yeah, I mean, run it with a foot switch. What more do you need?
Exactly.
And it's like, we now really understand how important it is to have something be small, compact, easy to transport when you're doing, like, you know, some of the gigs you and I do, or even like people doing fly gigs, like, but there's just no budget to cart amps around. Like, that is necessary these days. So yeah.
I think the Pod probably more than anything else changed the industry.
Yep.
Like, that's a transformative, you could say the GP100 is like, that's the
godfather.
That's the first, that one's gone to the moon and it's planted a flag there.
Yeah.
You know, but like the Pod is the first, it's the International Space Station. It's people living in space.
Yeah.
I don't want to go too much further with this analogy because I don't know what else we've done in space.
Well, but, can I just ask then? So you said the Johnson amp, right? What year was that? Was that the same era, like late 90s or?
Well, my understanding was, so Johnson had an amp called the Millennium, and it was a rebranded Digitech 2120.
Oh, okay.
So we're talking late 90s. Mate, I had an Australian guitar magazine with a demo CD/DVD of the Johnson J Station. Man, J Stations are really cheap at the moment. I should buy one before this episode goes out. I think Johnny C's got one.
Does he? Because that's I sort of vaguely remember seeing one in person, never playing it.
But it looked more like it was less. I mean, I'm looking at it now, and it's got a shape to it, but it was kind of like less gimmicky looking than the Pod. So Johnson, the J Station from the Johnson amplification arm of the Digitech Corporation. So it was Digitech.
Right, okay.
And the Millennium was, the 2120 in a combo with a power amp.
Can I think it was
stereo?
So Johnson guitars Same Johnson or different Johnson?
Different Johnson, I think.
Okay, because I don't know if that's a brand that's a worldwide thing, but the Johnson guitars, you'd see them in, they're like the lower, mid-low range of guitars you'd see in guitar shops.
Yeah, very, very much a budget thing over here. So
I wasn't certain if they were related or not. I sort of never got that far into it. So
yeah, maybe. I don't know. The logos look similar. So the J Station's like 2000-ish. And it was sort of like the pod had come out and then the J Station came out. I remember reading about Johnny Hyland using one to track an album, but it had a software editor. Line 6 also had Amp Farm in the late 90s.
Yeah, and Amp Farm was good, man, and still is quite good. Well, maybe not still is quite good, but yeah.
But that was, again, that's like a revolutionary thing, like a plug-in for guitar amp sounds.
Yep. I remember using that in the studio in at least 2010, 11, 12. I think it became unsupported at a certain point, or they stopped updating it for an OS update or whatever. But it still was good. It was like more usable than a pod in the studio, at least, because the sounds are really, really cool. Yeah, good Soldano in that, actually. But
there's like a few just kind of good sounds in there. So the J Station, so that's DigiTech, and then DigiTech had the Genesis. Do you remember those?
Genesis, I don't remember.
The DigiTech Genesis, it was like more poddish. There was the Genesis one. It was the Genesis one is red. So yeah, wow, this is 2002. So maybe they just kind of picked up the kind of J Station thing, and again, way more simplified than a pod. I'm going to just inject in here and say that, so we get in 2002, two other things which I think were, at the time, they didn't kind of realize how influential they were going to be. One is from TC Electronic, and it is called the TC Electronic Fireworks. Basically the same kind of thing as the G-Force.
Okay.
But the Fireworks, you could go slightly deeper with it. Fireworks G-Force, let's just say it's that, like, those TC products from whenever they came out. Again, I want to say late 90s. But the idea there was like you had a grid where you could place effect blocks on, and you could route them in parallel, and they had a modifier system. So you could go into the mod, like the mod matrix on the G-Force, and if you want to assign a built-in ADSR or LFO or envelope controller to any parameter, you can do that. All right. So the G-Force, the Fireworks, you've got this grid system and you've got modifiers. We're going to pick up that thread in just a second because we're all kind of leading to the moment of nuclear fusion. So late 90s, so mid 90s, you've got these starting products, the GP100, the Line 6 Axis. Then you get the pod. The pod kind of changes the game. But I don't think anybody really thinks the pod sounds high end. It's like a cool solution.
Yeah.
And you can get good sounds from it, but it's not a thing you plug into and you go, wow. Then you've got like the Digitech stuff happening at the same time. So kind of everyone's getting in. You've got the Behringer V-Amp. Remember that?
I was going to say, I definitely remember that. So that was just a straight up rip-off.
Straight up rip-off. Behringer doing Behringer things.
And there's one that you haven't said yet that I'm just waiting for. So keep going.
Which one is it? Because I may have missed something.
Mate, I hope you're going to mention it's slightly different maybe, but the old Zoom 707.
Oh, the Zoom 707, yeah.
Maybe not amp. It's not an amp modeler though, I suppose. It's more of it's a sound of distortion in a pedal, but it's affordable. And
so what you also had was you had this breakout in the early 2000s from the pod style. It just does amp and cab and a few effects to like digital multi-effects boards. So this is where you've got these breakthroughs in like chip design. You Korg, the Toneworks, and the Vox Valvetronics. Remember the Valvetronics?
I do, yeah.
Where it was just like kind of digital modeling with a token tube inserted in there, which probably in the power section.
Probably just for show. A lot of that stuff was like that. There was gear that was released around that time that would have an LED to represent the tube.
Stuff.
Yeah.
I think mic preamps.
I think they actually did have tubes in them, but no, I might be incorrect on that. Maybe that was the Behringers, but it's just all gimmicky stuff. They don't do anything for the sound.
So you can throw in these then you've got these like multi effects that have amp model things. We're talking early 2000s, but the the moment where stuff changed is in 2006, and it's called the Fractal Audio Axe-Fx.
Oh, never heard of it, Leon.
Never heard of it before. The magic thing with the Axe-Fx is you're taking... Oh, I forgot to mention something else with the G-Force, is the Eventide Eclipse.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Super high-end, opposite of the pod. Like, everyone agrees that Eventide sounds amazing. The Eclipse is a single rack space unit. You can run 2 independent effects in it. It's got all this... It's like just super high-end. Eventide still make it. It's over 20 years old. So you got the Eclipse hanging out there. So you got this like background, you got the Eventide in the background. You got the very clever routing system of the TC. You've got the digital amp modeling thing, and kind of like the way, the GP100 where there's the preamp and you got the pod. All of these things come together with like high-end DSP engineering. The Axe-Fx comes out and it's got another thing in there which changes the game: impulse responses. So you can have very accurate representation of cabs. You no longer have cab sims. It's definitely the first digital modeling thing that is universally considered to be great sounding.
It's funny because I knew we were leading to that, and I'll talk about my first experience with hearing about that as well in a second. Just before that though, like we're talking 10, 11 years between the first the Roland coming out and then the Axe-Fx, and to think that now it's 17 years like since the Axe-Fx came out. It feels like, and maybe it's because of the age we were at the time, but it feels like between 2006 and 1995 was like a million years. It may as well have been a million years. Whereas like the evolution of it since then, it's just like, yeah, again, maybe it's the age we're at because we've lived through it in a slightly different way.
I think as well, the price the Axe-Fx was suddenly achievable to us when we were, we had jobs and, stuff like that, where it's like, oh yeah, hey, you want the best thing. How did you hear about it? Because I heard about it from you.
Yeah, so I used to be on the Racer X forum because I was for a period of time there, probably Perth's biggest Paul Gilbert fan. All I did was listen to Mr. Big and, well, actually a lot of Paul's solo albums and stuff, and I hung out in the forum. And so there was I had the ADA MP1s, and that was great because racks and all that sort of stuff, it was what I was into. But someone had posted about this brand new thing that they just bought, being the Axe-Fx, the original one. I don't think it was the Ultra at that point. It was just the Axe-Fx. And they made the point of like, yep, I've just sold all my amps. Like, it's so good. I don't need anything else anymore. But I think what really, it wasn't marketing hype, but the thing that changed from the marketing was it was like a dynamic tube response. Do you remember
I remember reading that.
That's what people said. It's like when you have your line 6 or whatever it is, it's like, I don't really understand on a technical level how this stuff is, but let's just say if it's an impulse response of how the amp sounds at a certain volume, like maybe that's achievable, but because playing is so dynamic, it's going to react differently when it's loud and when it's quiet and these sort of things. So if this is not how this works, then I apologize, but that was my understanding of how the Ultra worked. So it does give you a much more accurate tube representation, or representation of what the tubes do. Which
it's like more detailed component modeling better. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So it wasn't. I remember at the time reading not so much a component thing. It was specifically like focused around the. It's more like a valve, like a tube.
Yeah,
because everything wanted to be more tube sounding. And
because I remember going to your place and you going, "There's this thing." And it's digital, but it actually sounds like, I think it was something like, it's like a pod, but it sounds good, and it also can do Eventide stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, it can't. Yeah. And then there was a video that someone put up.
The crystallizer?
Demoing the Crystal Echoes preset. Yeah. And it actually, it's one of the few times in my life with guitar gear I've had my mind blown. Yeah. I was like, what? And there was another one with someone playing the Plexi model, and it just sounded so good. It was like, what is this?
Yeah, it was huge, man. And so like, I don't think there was very many around, certainly in 2006. Like, it would have been 2006, or you know what? It would have been 2007 that I first saw it, not 2006, because we started hanging out like end of 2006. But at that point, because I can just vividly remember thinking like, yeah, when I get a job out of uni, I'm just going to have my Axe effects and my Sir guitar, and I'm going to be able to do anything in the world. That's all I need.
And here we are, ladies and gentlemen.
Here we are. So I think you started to see, okay, I don't want to step on too much of the digital guitar revolution. Are you going to talk about the 11?
Yeah, well, this is the so I think in basically 10 years, you've gone from no digital modelers to something which you could still happily gig with now. Like IRs,
Absolutely.
an absolutely comprehensive selection of great sounding effects, loads of amp models, 2 rack space unit. It is literally responsible for changing styles of music as well. Like I remember maybe 2010, 2011, like hearing stuff where it's like, what are these guitar sounds? And it was just like Axe effects. You just, you can put a gate here and a gate there, and yeah, it's pretty amazing the way it actually had it's easy to take for granted now because like everything's really good, but just sort of how it just came out of nowhere and just pretty much changed. Like the Roland got the little pebble rolling down, but the Axe effects was like the landslide hitting the village kind of thing. It was like, whoa, this is a game changer. I remember not long after that, DigiDesign coming out with the 11 rack. And again, you saying, oh, it's kind of like an Axe effects, but just like a little bit easier to get and a little bit cheaper.
Yeah, I think we mentioned that the other week because that's the one of the negatives about Fractal is the quantity that they make of their products is not to the scale of like a Line 6 or anything like that.
Or even an Avid DigiDesign.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the 11 rack was the same size. It was probably half the price, or at least 2/3 of the price.
And you could buy it at a music store here.
Yeah, and you could also plug it in and use it as your interface for Pro Tools, because at that time with Pro Tools...
big deal, man.
Yeah, you couldn't with Pro Tools, which... Like, this is one of those things I tell my students because it's hard to believe now, but if you didn't have a piece of Avid or DigiDesign hardware attached to your Pro Tools system, you couldn't use Pro Tools up until about 2009, I believe. And so there was even a point where, like, maybe it was even 2010, but I think it was 2009. If you couldn't use Pro Tools on a laptop, like remotely, it was not possible because you'd need to be dragging around your MBox or your like HD system. They had released like something that was the size of a thumb drive with a headphone output on it, and that would qualify as being like the DigiDesign hardware, so you could take that and work remotely or whatever you wanted to do. That was a very short period of time that they had that before. I don't know if you know this or not, but there was like, it was probably around 2009 2010, someone hacked the Pro Tools software so that it was actually usable on anything.
Wow.
And I suspect, well, at the time, this was the speculation that that's why they opened it up, is because like someone worked out how to make it usable on whatever you wanted.
Yeah.
So they were just like, fuck it, here you go. There's a lot of stories from like Avid and DigiDesign that are like, and true or not, where they will spin things in different ways, where it's like, we haven't got offline bounce in our software because we need to rewrite the entire software to make that doable, which may be true because I don't know that or not. But there could be a lot of other spin involved. We can't possibly work this on a laptop because the entire software needs to be designed from the ground up, redesigned from the so it's one of those things. So anyway, so that was a little tangent, but like the 11 was, you could use it as your interface. It had all the same sort of sounds in it. The 11 plugin is still really useful.
When I bought your old Pro Tools computer, I just used 11, the plugin. The stock amp, whatever it is, wrote so many songs with that. Worth mentioning as well, Line 6 in the early 2000s had something called the tone port, which was like you plug your guitar into it, and it had like, you could jam along with songs. And I got it for Christmas one year, and it wouldn't work with the home computer that my parents had, and it was so frustrating. And my parents returned it, and I got a Boss EQ20 pedal and a bunch of store credit because it was really expensive. I think I bought a few other pedals with that.
Is that when you got
2002?
Can you? Sorry, this is so out of left field of a question. When did you get the Seymour Duncan pickup booster?
I think with some
was that it?
You know, yeah, because it was like this thing was probably like $700.
Yeah. Because I remember I feel like that maybe you told me that at the time. You got the
I ended up getting like an EQ20, and then I had store credit, and then the pickup booster came out, so I bought that. That was kind of a fun. It had the little resonance switch on there, and a few like probably an SD1 like over years.
Yeah,
it was like I just had this long running credit at Cosmic, and would be like, oh, how much credit do I have? I think the last $80 I had on there, I bought an SD1. They hooked me up.
That's cool.
And the other thing would be obviously then the Kemper.
Yeah, so that's that's like a little 2012. Okay, well, slightly before that, though, Axifex 2 comes out because that's when
2011,
yeah. Because the reason I got an Axifex, the way I was able to afford it, because it wasn't, he said like Axifex comes out and it's affordable. It wasn't in Australia because I don't think there was a distributor. Do you know when Independent started selling them? Like in the timeline of the grand timeline?
I actually don't. I'd have to ask.
Yeah, so I feel like it was a direct thing, maybe, that you had to order them through, and they were.
I've been trying to find the email. I sent an email in like 2008 to Fractal, being like, "How the hell do I buy one of these?"
Yeah, right.
And they were like, "Oh, you'd have to do this, but you'd be responsible for, the import duties and stuff like that." And I just never replied to it.
It would have been so expensive, man. It would have been like $4 or $5 grand, I reckon, to get your hands on one of those in the late 2000s. Yeah, 2008, 2009. But when the Axifex 2 came out,
I found it. This email that I wrote already makes me infuriated because there's no capitalization on anything.
Oh, yuck.
Lowercase h. Hi guys, lowercase I. I live in Australia. Very interesting in the Axifex. I'm unsure about how I could get one. Would I have to purchase it direct and have it shipped across? Are there any deals I can go through? What would postage and handling be? And the response I got is, we only sell direct, so you'd have to order through our online store. Shipping is $135 for USPS Express. You will be responsible for any duties, taxes.
Oh yeah,
that was. Troy, can you believe this? I sent that email on April 19th.
Did you? No way. Happy anniversary. 14 years. Oh, well, not actually 14 years.
I'm fairly certain I've screen capped this email and sent it to them as well, and being like, hey, how crazy is this? So it's 2009, so that still would have been the Ultra. But yeah, I think the 2 came out in 2009, and then I remember you bought one.
Well, yeah, because I bought the Axifex Ultra in 2011 off the Fractal forum. Someone was selling one.
Wow.
Because what happened was everybody was getting rid of that Axifex 1s so they could buy the Axifex 2. So there was like a mass... Yeah, literally, like, they were so hard to find secondhand, like almost impossible. Axifex 2 comes out and there's just a plethora of them. And so I bought one. I reckon it was 1,600 Australian is what I paid for it, including shipping. It came from America, and I think I got it at the start of 2012, I want to say. It wasn't... No, sorry, it would have been... it was middle of 2011. That's when it was. And yeah, finally got to play around with it, plugged it in, sounded awful. Like, I hated the way it sounded. And there's a couple of reasons for that. At the time, and it's probably different now, but there was this thing that kept coming up when I was looking at the Axifex of like, it takes like a week to get it to sound good. And like nowadays I probably could work out what it is, but I'm pretty certain it's because like the first time I tried to play it was through my orange 1x12 cab. I probably had speaker like emulation on whatever thing I was like tone I was working with.
Yeah, and tab IR on into a power amp, into a cab.
Yeah, so there was like now I go, oh well, of course that's what it was, but you just didn't really know back then. But anyway, so I got mine, and then I used it for a bit. I did a tour with it. I gigged with it a little bit. Had to buy a Behringer. Remember, I had the Behringer foot switch.
The FCB with the updated EPROM.
Yep, had to get that from Europe so it would all work hunky-dory or whatever it was. But then I ended up selling it in 2012 before we went to America because I think it was to cover the flights.
Right.
And at the time, I just wasn't really using it as much as I thought I would. And I was like, well, you know what? I probably will get more. I can always get one again. I think I actually found at that point, the gigs I was doing, well, I was starting to do a lot more bass gigs, so I wasn't needing it to do guitar stuff. And I also didn't really like dialing in sounds on the unit itself. Like it was like, and remember you had to plug it in via a USB to MIDI cable to use the editor. It was just a bit of a pain, but it sounded really good. And anyway, like long story short, I sold it to a friend of ours, Ryan. Ryan ended up selling it to a friend of mine, Leon Todd, and then Leon becomes Mr. Fractal from 2016 onwards, basically.
Because Ryan sold it because he bought an AX8.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it come up for sale. I was like, I should just buy that, because around that time, 2015, 2016, I'd started, like I had a pretty big pedal board with a switcher, and we were doing a lot of like fly gigs to mine sites, so using backline amps. And it was always okay, but you know, I did this one gig where the backline amps were a pair of deluxe reverbs, and I just couldn't get it to work with the stuff that I'd bought on my board, and it was just a tough gig. I remember the next time we played there, I used the 2 deluxe reverbs as stands for the Axe FX Ultra. That was my kind of like revenge. So yeah, I went through all these things, like trying out these little preamp pedals. You know, I looked at the Helix at the time. I looked at the Kemper stuff. And yeah, Ryan's Axe Ultra came up, and I was like, I think that's what I want. And got it. And then just, you know,
immediately broke it the second that you got it.
Immediately put it on a table, and it fell off, and one of the rack ears got bent horribly. So off to a great start here. And then plugged it in, and I was like, that sounds okay. And I had the speaker emulation off going into a power amp return. And
that old chestnut.
Then reading the forum, reading the wiki, kind of figuring out how to dial it in. And then kind of, I'll just use it for gigs where they're fly gigs, and I'll run into a tube power amp return, I'll get a solid state power amp and run into a cab, turn into, oh, this thing sounds pretty good direct. I'm just going to do that. And then, in 2016, we did America and we did Europe, and I just carted that thing around and ran it direct everywhere, and it sounded really, really good. I love that thing.
The rest is history.
A lot of good gigs with it. And
where is it now? Have you still got it?
Still got it.
Oh, there you go.
I need to bring it out for a video. So that's the one, Troy.
That's the magic one.
I will truly never sell that thing, just because I now have a sentimental attachment to it. Not just for myself, but like, you know, because you had it and Ryan had it, and it's kind of it's a cool little story. So
sorry, I was gonna
then back onto it. You've got the Kemper as like the amp cloning thing was pretty cool. And then kind of gimmicky, but then like I think Michael Britt started profiling stuff, and people were like, oh, you just get these profiles and they're the best.
So that was actually just one half step backwards. I do remember with the Axe FX, something that a lot of people were doing were buying IR packs for them, because the internal ones or the stock ones were a bit whatever. So the red wires were really popular.
I got the red wires ones, and they were great.
I don't remember if I got them or not. I feel like I was using stock stuff, but it's a bit hard to remember back then. I would have gotten, I usually try and do reasonable deep dives with gear like that, which I'm planning to a lot. Like when I got my, so I use the 2-note stuff, the reload, the torpedo reload. Like I bought a bunch of own hammer IRs and stuff. So those were really cool. But yeah, red wires, maybe I had those, maybe I don't. A little hard to remember. But that was kind of that thing of like when you come to the Kemper and it's like, well, yeah, just go buy someone else's hard work. You want the sound of this, then there it is. So actually using the Kempers and trying it for the first time, do you remember doing it?
Yeah, a friend of mine bought one, and it was really cool. I kind of liked it, and I profiled a few amps that I had and thought it sounded pretty good. The thing that makes a lot of sense in hindsight is that, you know, if you're in the US, it's relatively easy to get an Axe FX. It's a little bit more difficult because of the availability in Europe and Australia and everywhere else. Whereas like something like the Kemper, it's made in Germany. So that's why so many European bands use Kempers. It makes sense. Again, the go into a music store and buy one is a bit of a thing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like maybe the first time I saw one was in a music store in like maybe even 2015, so it was a little bit later. But that was actually doable as well.
Yeah.
Which it sort of makes a difference. I mean,
the cool thing, Kemper came out with a powered version as well. So,
Yep.
you know, that's, you profile your head or your heads and amps, and you just take that and use a backline cab. It makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
The other thing as well, which kind of is simmering in the background of all of this, is like Line 6 is still doing stuff. You know, you got the like pod iterations, the pod HD, I remember kind of being like a bit of a deal. Lots of people had those.
Yep.
Mostly using them as like effects boards. But yeah, then they kind of leveled up and brought out the Helix, which for a lot of people, Line 6 was like a bit of a running joke, you know?
Oh, it was a huge running joke. I mean, once you got past that level, and not even compared to Fractal and all that sort of stuff, but I think modeling maybe got a little lame, or there was like, maybe it was more guitar amps for a bit, at least over here. So you just wouldn't really think about using a pod, like just there's other solutions. But yeah, I guess maybe the Fractals and the 11s and all that sort of stuff overtook that. But certainly I would have joked about Line 6 for a really long time. And now I'm a very, very, very big user of their gear.
And then like the Helix came out and they kind of solved, I mean, it sounds great, but they solved one big issue with all of these things, which is that they're kind of hard to use.
Yep.
And the Helix still is the gold standard in terms of like user interfaces. You know, they hired a UI designer to do that.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, there's like they paid someone money to design that. You can tell because it makes a lot of sense. So
because like I've had a lot of times with the HX Stomp or the Pod Go. Well, I remember I was with you. We did that gig about 2 years ago. The big thing on the back of the truck. Remember with
oh yeah.
And I was playing acoustic for some of the gig and bass for the rest of the gig. And I got there and realized I actually didn't have a bass preset set up or bass tone set up for this gig. I had the bass and I had the Pod Go. And it's usually one of those things where like, oh, fuck, I don't have my computer here and I'm going to need to dial it in. But I just like sat on the stage for about 3 minutes and I was like, oh, cool. How do I bring up an amp? Oh, it's like this. Bam, there it is. Oh, that sounds okay. How do I add a compressor in? It took no time and it sounded awesome. And then since then, like I've been at gigs and just hated my tone and changed it on the fly.
Yeah.
I've changed stuff mid-song and been happy with it. You know what I mean? Like that's not something I could ever really do. Certainly with the Axe Ultra, I could do it. I sort of could do it with the Axe 8, but limited. Because like I still find, even though I've had it for a long time, I still find elements of getting into the Axe 8 kind of a pain in the ass to do stuff with.
Yeah, it's the classic, like, it's the user interface is designed by an engineer, not a user interface person. What's nice about like the FM3 and FM9 and the Axe 3 is they've like incorporated a lot of usability requests. Like the 5 encoders you can set up on like a perform page, you can double tap stuff and it does things like it's certainly not as slick as a Helix, but it's a whole lot more usable than an Axe Ultra, which is a whole lot more usable than a Roland GP100. So that's probably the last hurdle that was really kind of crossed, is just making it, and like the Helix, it felt like, modeling was a real niche thing and like you needed a degree to know how to get good sounds out of these things. But I think the Helix kind of closed the gap where it's, people who otherwise don't know how this stuff works get really good sounds out of it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's that like, it took 20 years to go from it not existing to having stuff that sounds good and is easy to use and widely available.
Yeah. Like nowadays, the amount of, okay, like take Nuix or Mua or any of those companies, like
Hotone.
Yeah, they all do these amp like modeling things and they're all good and they're all usable. And yeah, as you say, like the interface thing on them, they're just like, they're not hard. They're not made for dummies, but it's like, yeah, anyone could do it. It's and it shouldn't be that fucking hard to get a guitar sound. Like a traditional guitar setup and the knobs and the layout isn't that hard in the first place. So why does it have to be that difficult? We kind of understand. It's like if it's made by engineers. Like no offense to Cliff and everyone else. Like that's not a you problem. You made like we can't all be like good at everything.
The best at everything, yeah.
Like
like Cliff's admitted that on the forum and said like I try my best, but like we first and foremost want to make our products to sound as good as possible. It's a no compromise approach to the hardware and the software. And, you know, like, yeah, we're our ears are open. We're trying to do this stuff. It just takes a little bit of time to implement these requests. So, and to their credit, you know, they like are constantly adding new stuff. That's the other thing I think as well, which is a bit underrated, is with Fractal, it's like the free constant stream of software updates, firmware updates, where like, you know, some of the old Line 6 stuff, you have to like buy extra content, like the Metal Amps pack or something.
I mean, to their credit, like I've updated the firmware on mine a few times and it just happens now.
Yeah.
Like you get stuff for free and
that's
actually
standard procedure now.
Yeah. But stuff like, when was it, like a year ago, or maybe it was 2 years? Yeah, it would have been a year ago. I think they updated it so that all of a sudden you could have 2 more blocks in the
Helix, the HX Stomp.
In the HX Stomp. It's like, fuck yeah, that's awesome. It's so usable. It's so useful.
8 instead of 6 is a big difference. It's really, really cool.
And that came out of nowhere, like, as far as I could tell, that came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it's kind of like, it's kind of a good, like, the modeling thing is kind of a cool story because, you know, you have, it's like one of the few cases of like disruption happening where it made stuff better for everybody. Like, you know, the Axe-Fx basically came out of nowhere. Like Cliff was building them in his kitchen. And Line 6 was, you know, people making jokes about Line 6, but, you know, the Axe-Fx, if anything, proved that you could have that approach to high quality DSP stuff. And then, you know, like Line 6 aren't a joke anymore. It's like good for them. It's good for all the other companies that do similar modeling things. Good for the end user. It's become a very, you know, in some ways oversaturated, in some ways like just really competitive market where it's like the Helix gets a firmware update and people complain on the Fractal forum, oh, we want this thing, and you get new stuff. And then, yeah, I guess then you've got now the improvements seemingly are so marginal now where it's like, you know, what does a quad cortex do that a Kemper doesn't? Well, it's a lot smaller and it has a touch screen. And, you know, yeah, the captures sound maybe 5% more accurate, you know. The Axe-Fx 3 versus the Axe-Fx 2, is there that much of a difference? Well, if you're into the minutia, yeah, but at the same time, the Axe-Fx 2 was totally fine for recording an entire album with. Yeah.
And you know? So was the
so
Ultra.
Is the Kemper, so is the Ultra. Yeah. It's like, you know, you've made these like evolutionary steps, and the rest of it, like the last 10 years has basically just been like consolidation.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is interesting to consider what is next with this. I'm not forward thinking enough to really have an answer.
I'll tell you what it is, Troy. It's definitely machine learning, but it's not profiling. It's being able to type into your modeler. I might have mentioned this last week. Make me a preset that sounds like Artist X.
Right.
That's where it's going. And I wouldn't be surprised if that first comes out as a plugin. You know, it's like, and there's probably a race on right now for that. Well, you know, if I was Neural DSP or Positive Grid or any of these other companies, I would be trying to come out with a really cool product that takes that like amp capture thing, but also has effects where you can go like, make me sound like Eddie Van Halen, 1983. And it references some, you know, there's a backlog of reference tones. It's basically
you don't
like
even need to do that
for guitar.
Like if you've got, it's like like access to Spotify and Shazam and stuff. It's just like, you just load the song in straight from the internet. It's like
Shazam for guitar tones. There you go. That's a way better way of saying it.
Yeah, that's sad. I mean, in many ways, the way that creativity works within that is a little sad, because it is already so easy, and the amount of understanding and learning. There's an argument to say that is also like irrelevant. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
I was going to say before when we were talking about the some of the digital.
Shut up and make some music. You've just spoken for 2 hours about guitar gear. Like that's kind of you can't argue with that.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's a fun hobby.
No, I was going to say, like, we're talking about digital audio and we're talking about like the divide of the real technical engineering aspects of it, but then the user experience of how to edit audio and stuff. Like, doesn't the amount of engineers that have got, like, let's say YouTube channels, like really amazing engineers that have YouTube channels and could talk about compression and EQ and like how to mix a song, I'd say 1% of them has any very basic understanding about the technical stuff. And that's probably just Dan Worrell. And nobody else, because why does it matter? It's like, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't be creative and still be good at your job. But yeah, I guess like with all this, the concept of the AI stuff, like part of what I enjoy about doing the stuff that I do is the learning of it. So like, I don't want to shit on anyone just using the cheat code. Like, same thing can be said for like your Kempers and your aspects.
I think
things. It's
I think there is like, there's the personal aspect of all of these things where human beings have to use them and be in a constant state of learning. And I think you can have that AI stuff supplement your desire to learn. You know, it can that's why those kind of GPT-4 and stuff like that, it's like interesting that it's somewhat they're using language models, and it's a whole other thing. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to have something. Imagine you could have a conversation with your guitar plugin about the tone you're trying to dial in, and it can suggest things like, you're having trouble with the low end, or the highs sound harsh. Try this.
Yep.
There you go. Virtual Leon for your.
Was it you saying last week, like, you're using AI just to help search for answers for things? Someone else. There might have been someone else I was talking to.
Might have been someone else, but like, you know, ChatGPT, that's the people who really like it. That's what they're using. Like, what's the best place to eat in this town? And, you know, give you answers. That's a very good way of using that. Like, there was someone I was talking to about coding maybe, and they were saying they were using ChatGPT not to like spit out a code for whatever project they were doing, but just to be like, I don't understand what this concept is. ChatGPT, can you just explain this to me? Which is a thing that like I've gone through forum posts to understand like a bit of Java stuff when there's a term that I'm like, what does this do? And it's just like, it takes away that manual thing of like, fuck, I just have to go through like 600 fucking of the same forums to like threads to get to the thing. At least ChatGPT, I can understand where that works for there. I haven't looked into it that much. I don't use it, but I'll eventually get there. It's pretty fun. Like, it's actually genuinely pretty fun. I just want it to spit out, you know, porn of Kempers and Axe Fx's just doing naughty stuff with each other, you know? Mate, that's the ultimate goal of the internet, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's whatever your passion is, furry cosplay of that passion. No disrespect to anybody who enjoys any of those things, you know. As always, Troy, we don't want to yuck anyone's yum. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Well, mate, this has been an absolute barnstormer of a podcast. Yep. Maybe the longest episode that will ever exist. Knocking on the door of 2 hours at the moment, which is exciting. We might have to even split this one up into part 1 and part 2. You want to do it, or should I just fucking like put them out as one? Oh, we'll do part 1, part 2, and we'll just do them on 2 different days, hey? Yeah. Part 1 can come out now, part 2 can come out tomorrow. Pretty good. Sounds good. Well, Uncle Leon, it's always a pleasure, mate. Anything else you want to say to our listeners out there? I just want them to realize that they are loved and we appreciate them, and I hope they have a great day, and thank you for listening to the podcast. I just want to clarify that I don't love you. Leon might, but that's a silly thing to say. Mate, love is infinite, so, you know, there's always room for more. Uncle Leon, I'll see you next week. We'll have some more topics. Like the Instagram page, give us some comments, send us an email at www.com.au. I'm kidding, that's not an actual thing. And otherwise, we'll see you next week. Take it easy, everybody. Thanks. Bye. The Gear Podcast outro theme song. Yeah. Cha 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 cha.